slitting this off with a saw now.
I took it off. It's interfering with this guy.
So
anyway, it does run. I have the video on my cell phone if you want to see that. And if you look at the bottom of here, you can see all the guts. There's a gel cell in there, one of the Ford coilover coils, one of the Dave Sage ignition systems, and then one of the other things is all the grounds go to one of the bolts holding the engine on the box. So there's no worry about that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things that a lot of people foul up. They forget they got to ground the engine. Spark plugs don't work that way.
One thing he did on this thing that I didn't tell him about, that flywheel, I put a set screw in both sides, coming in both sides. And then I haven't had any trouble with them staying tight.
They do loosen up.
But only one set screw, what happens is it lets that thing rock and it will loosen up.
90 degrees apart?
Pardon?
Put them 90 degrees apart?
No, 180. And flatten, the first one is on top of the groove, in your keyway. The other one, when you put it down, you want to flatten the crankshaft there, or you'll burr it and you'll never be able to get the flywheel off again.
No, I put them on the same side, put them on top of the keyway.
Oh, you're putting them this way?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a good idea.
On top of the keyway.
I can get them off. When I had, I think the weights here before, along with the balancing system, and you can see I dropped it once. The plastic's a little fragile. But I forgot to contemplate the weight of the throw. So I've got these little tiny balance weights on. I put them on the balancer and it goes boom. Oh dear. So then I said, I'll make some big ones and I can cut them down. So I made really big ones, almost a 2-inch diameter. Cut them in two. Went to slot them, screwed up. Instead of doing a 1/4-inch deep slot, I did 400 thou. Put them on anyway, and it's perfectly balanced. So once in a while you can screw up and it works out. One of the things I did is an adapter for Albrecht chuck, to your R8. I bend it. It turns out, you're always trying to stick that chuck in and there's not enough clearance. So I'm holding it up and I grab the table drive and slowly over and I let this slip down a little bit, and that Albrecht chuck cut a gouge out of the top of my Kurt slide, or vise, and bent this. Just a little. Yeah. The bad news is, well, other than knock the mill out of tram, you buy a good one of these, what do you think these things cost?
$150.
$190 delivered for an Albrecht.
$190. Oh my God.
These are $140 and they're soft. If you want a hardened one, it's $190 delivered for MFC. It's unbelievable. The chucks are $550.
Now if he runs his chuck into that, it'll break off instead of bending.
Yeah. The other thing I found out, the fuel hose is a little loose on the carburetor. And, how do you get a little tiny clamp down there? I don't like wire. So I printed a little piece that's 10 thousandths smaller ID, put it on the hose, slid it over, and it holds it perfectly. So you can make these out of anything, aluminum, plastic.
Barrels?
Yeah.
No, I see.
I can make more.
I figured that as soon as you were going to toss it.
I tried different ones. There's one that's got a flange on it so you can grab it with pliers. That turned out to not necessary. This one's got a spiral cut in it. But all it does is put just a little pressure on it and they won't come off. Sorry I can't run it. Or maybe it's good I can't try. But anyway, there it is.
What's this thing right under there?
Oh. Well, I took Paul's. I thought Paul had a really nifty idea to use a switch rather than a Hall effect. So what I didn't think was that the timing, if you will, disc, it's got the magnet in it, is really close to the engine. And so is the base of the engine and the wood it's on. And so to put a hole through there, I actually had to make a, what would you call it, like a paper drill, you know, where it's just a tube that's sharpened on the inside. So I could cut through the wood and not split it. And then I 3D printed a support for that piece of 16th inch brass tubing that's got the reed switch inside. And the brass tubing's one side of the circuit. So it works out wide. You can slide up down to adjust timing, although I haven't had to do that. And that's the printed thing that follows the contour of the wood. I find a 3D printer really, really useful in the shop. I can cover up a lot of mistakes. Anyway, that's it.
Very nice.
And if anybody wants to see it, I actually have the video. And it's amazing, it just sits there. Even on a slick surface, it doesn't move.
Well, now that it runs, you can take it and set it on the on the shelf and forget about it.
Yeah,
Now I gotta finish writing about it now.
if you make a little plastic cover, you can print it, you know. Print a little plastic cover.
Yeah.
That way the dust doesn't get in.
Let's see. Yeah, the new printer would probably print one that big. It'd only take about 3 days.
You could run the video so they can hear it run,
Oh,
just to prove it.
come on. Live. Anybody know how to use a phone?
Too complicated.
Oh. Come on, come on. Sorry, it's talking to my hearing aids. I don't know how to stop that. It ran good though.
Somebody put your ear to the other side.
Well, I'm going to jump in and do my stuff now. Dwight, my mentor, you know, he set me on this path of making a copy of his, we call it the Black Widow 4. I should have brought it in because I forgot that we have a bunch of people this month that weren't here last month. But last month he saw the block. I now have nice, it's amazing, you know, I got these beautiful little, I got all the cylinders are in, nice. But you know, you start out with a piece of cast iron, it's this big around. You end up with these little 1/16 of an inch wide cylinders. That's a lot of cast iron in the dumpster. So anyway, the sleeves are in.
It hurts, doesn't it?
Huh?
It hurts.
Yeah, and I you probably are very efficient. You know, I always leave it that much more so I can chuck it easily and do it all in once, and then that's more waste.
Hey Paul,
Yeah.
you know cast iron's good for roses.
Oh, really?
Plants, they just love that stuff.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never thought of that. Did you hear that?
No.
Cast iron's good for roses. Fertilizer.
Remember John Palmer with his
Yeah.
5,600 pounds of up there in the
Oh,
backyard?
yeah, well, 91 pounds of cast iron to a 9-pound cylinder.
So the block is done. The cylinders are in. Then I, you know, that Dwight made the crankshaft. I did the little end finishing, but the journals were all done. But I made the rods to size, and Dwight's journals have a nice little radius to them. So they fit, but they were tight. So then I hand scraped them, and that was pretty much a whole half a day there. That's the other thing. If you don't have a scraper, get one. I was over at Dwight's, and he noticed one. He said, "Oh, you don't have a scraper?" So he gave it to me. I use that tool so much now. It started out originally as a triangle file, I believe, and then Dwight sharpens it up to a razor blade, and they're so handy for deburring and with these rods. I was hand scraping. Long story, but I'll tell it anyway. I've made this type of pump before. It's the same as Dwight has, and several other of you have made it. It's a gear pump, but I got all done, and I was testing it with a little bucket of oil, and I'm driving it with a drill, and just was pumping air. It turned out I had a pinhole in one of these brass caps that I made, so it was sucking air. Once I fixed that, this is still beyond my comprehension. I had a pressure gauge on it because I wanted to, this thing has a little relief valve, the spring. I make my relief valves different than the plans. I think mine's easier to build and better. It's got a brass seat, and then it's just a ball bearing and a spring, which is easier to build than all the other stuff. So I had a pressure gauge on there in it. When I finally got the pinhole fixed, boom, I was up to 100 pounds. Whoa. So then I adjusted it, got it down to 80 pounds. Then I took it off, and it still defies logic. It held with the drill off. It's a gear pump. It shouldn't hold. Out of steel, drill all those holes, cut it in half. He can just put an O-ring on there, holds his drilling fixture with those holes. And I could have spent the $6 and gone over and visited Dwight and borrowed his fixture, but I was just thinking about it, so I ended up doing it my way. And I had this key stock and put the 57 thousandths hole in the end, milled it down to 62 wide. Then I have an indexing head, and I set up a temporary out of scrap material to hold this up nice and perpendicular to the axis. Then I could just index, drill, index, drill. So it worked pretty fast.
How many holes?
12 in each, 4 pistons.
12 for that size.
Yep.
Hey, Paul, could you back up? How does Dwight's fixture keep the drill in the center of that groove? What
If you look, if you would
what's the
imagine
reference
this,
for that?
if you imagine this cylinder has the essentially the piston ring groove in it, and he got those holes dead nuts on there somehow. Magic Dwight.
Yeah.
So it actually fits in the groove.
Yeah,
Okay.
the thing was cut in half, and it looks like there's a piston ring in there with the holes.
And
How
it's
did
got-
you get those dead nuts on? I
It's
don't
got
know.
a sleeve that rolls, the thing is actually almost as long as the piston is. And so to hold it in place, I just roll the O-ring up on it and hold it in place and put it on my little high-speed drill. And I do it by hand. I don't have
Board
to
that
set it
little
up.
But you remember, he was cranking out V8s like General Motors there for a while. Really, he's doing 24 pistons. For me, this worked out fine. I was happy.
Yeah, not in a hurry.
And then, like they say, you can screw up a lot. Oh, then onto the head. A lot of work here. You know, they teach you trigonometry in school, but I use more trig on this thing than I ever had a reason to. Getting the port angles to clear this. There's a pretty big spark plug hole here. It has to clear that. Has to clear this bolt. And I have to admit, I cheated a little bit because on my computer screen, I kept having them coming directly into the port and just looking for the best angle, and couldn't quite get it. So I finally cheated. Dwight gave me the original as a master, so I pulled off the intake and exhaust manifold and then looked into its port, see what size holes he was using. I thought maybe he went to a smaller hole. Don't know why it didn't occur to me, but he comes in not on center of the port, comes into the side of the port. Oh, duh. And then after coming in at that angle with a square end mill, you look down there and go like, that ain't gonna flow worth a crap. I'm thinking, boy, I wish I had a 5/16 ball end mill, and I dug around and I had one. Oh. After I did that, with that radius, when it comes in, all I can tell you is, call me Jerry Branch at Flowmetrics. And when I put it under hot water, my sink cleaning it, it shoots out of there unobstructed. So it's gonna flow good. So I added one thing to make it different than Dwight's. I finned the front. Of course, it meant I had to put this hole a little bit different. And now the nightmare that's to come is this intake and exhaust manifold. If you looked at Dwight's, they're, as usual, gorgeous stainless steel tubes, just like his V8s, all curved and perfect. And we used to have this welder, Tim, but he's a happy man in Idaho now. So I'm going to have to silver solder it, and my history of silver soldering is not the best. basically because I'm impatient and filthy.
Well, this will give you an opportunity to do a little exercise.
Oh yeah, I only bought a 6-foot length of stainless, but I think I'm going to need more.
You know how Rod Beeman made his?
No.
He machined them in half, machined 2 halves, put them together and welded them.
Yeah, I think didn't bar stock and everything, where you start off with a flat surface or relatively flat surface that you can true up in your mill, that sort of thing. But with the casting, you don't have a flat surface to start with. You have to create one to use as a reference surface. And so I puzzled over this for quite a while. Finally realized that the plans, the way they were drawn, is everything was off a center point in the middle here, with a center line this way and a center line this way. And so I had to figure out a way to accurately locate that center point and then measure from it. And the problem was the three-dimensional nature of the casting made that difficult to do. The answer was mount this on the bed of the XY table on my mill and use this laser finder thing, this little laser deal that is a pointer, very accurate. Guy used to display these at the Good Guys thing, thing. Anyway, chuck this up there, and then you could locate the sides and locate the middle, and find your center point there, and then make measurements off of that very accurately with that, and then start machining the various surfaces. So I got a good start on it. I'm going to report as I go on this one. And Dwight's going to answer all my questions. So he promised.
Just like Schultz in that old movie.
Yeah, I know nothing.
And of course, if all else fails, it makes a good birdhouse.
You know, one of the tricks that I was taught when you started with castings, this was Carmen Adams, if some of you remember him. He'd always get a casting, he'd do this, and then he'd put it on a plate, and that plate was the reference.
Yep.
For everything.
Don't take it off of the plate until
Yeah, you left it on that plate till he was done machining.
Yeah.
And that worked, it was very quick.
Well, how do you hold it onto the plate?
Fold it.
JB will.
JB Weld to do it, but I mean, he'd bolt it, find the place, understand where there had to be a couple screw holes, put them in and clamp it down and away
Well,
it
you
goes.
you make a custom plate that's the sacrificial plate.
Yeah, let's go.
I got one thing. I told myself I would not forget this. This is the only good tip you're going to get out of me probably in the next year. I have a Bridgeport clone mill called a Sharp. Good machine, but the quill was rattling quite a bit. I was blaming it on me because I do quite a bit of fly cutting, and I figured I was putting a lot of knock load on the thing. And right on the side of the head of the mill, it tells you where to oil, when I do all the time, but also says once a week, put 5 drops of oil, lower the quill 2 inches, and put 5 drops of oil down the drawbar. Well, I have a power drawbar which doesn't allow that. And I thought, maybe I should follow the damn instructions. So I took off my power drawbar, put some, and the other thing I think I used to do is I put the oil up there, but I didn't pull it down 2 inches so the oil wasn't going where it needs to go, down to the quill spline. Did that, I gave it a lot more than 2 drops, I gave it a bunch. My head is like quieter than it was the day I got it. So, I mean, it's like going from, one of these days I'm going to have to rebuild his head, to like, wow, is this thing as quiet as Dwight's head? Dwight's got a really nice, quiet head, too. So, that lasted for about a week, then it started making noise again, so I said, well, if 5 drops is good, screw it, I had to pull up the power drawbar again, and I pulled it down, and I put a bunch of oil, then I got up my moly disulfide grease, and so it's been running stone quiet and I've been running the hell out of it. I mean, like these things actually take about an hour non-stop running, and this was all done manually. But so anyway, that little drip of oil down that drawbar once a week. Do it.
By the way, speaking of sharp, if anybody has a sharp lathe, one of our club members bought a new one, tool room lathe, and had a few problems with it, and they took care of it. And then he put collets in it, and they didn't fit quite right. And he looks inside the spindle, and there's a gouge in it. So he cleans it up. Next time he puts a collet in it, there's a gouge in it. They forgot to harden the spindle.
Oh Jesus!
So they're shipping him a whole brand new lathe.
We bought a bunch of them at the lab, and the guys were very happy with them. I
they're
mean,
good machines.
it was, you know, it's a Hardinge clone, but
They didn't quite clone it. Sounds like.
Hey, Ford forgot to do that to the rear end gear on my
all right, Dwight, you got something?
car. They had to replace something.
Right here, sitting on top of his box, I got this stuff from Ken Hurst. He passed away a couple of years ago, and I got all of his mismatch and stuff, junk. And in there, surprising, I found this. Well, that is the rod that came out of my Challenger V8. And if you take a good look at it, it's got the broken bolt inside of it. The rod was made out of I think it was either 2024 or 7075, I'm not sure. But the story about this is when you're putting rods in a hot engine, which these V8s are, make sure you put good fasteners in. Don't put in generic fasteners, because that's what that was. It was a generic fastener. So now I put in high-grade socket head cap screws in the rods only. Everything else generic is fine. But in the rod, go the expensive way and put in good stuff.
They're called Unbreakos.
That makes sense.
ARP, huh?
Yeah, if you're running 5,000 RPM,
10,000.
5,000, that's idling.
no, I know, but just as a number, if you're you're yanking on that thing that many times every minute. You're just yanking on it. And so it needs quality material.
Actually, the truth is you're not yanking on it ever.
Pardon?
It's always pushing.
Yeah,
It still will break though.
and it's supercharged too.
It's got a reverse direction.
But it gets pushed that way.
For anybody in here that's interested, I don't know if we can clear this thing off so I can show you the box. Jim Kipp, he lives in Southern California, and he's got a shop in the industrial area. I've been there, and this thing is in the center of an industrial area, and he's got the whole building, and it's 2 buildings long because it's in the center of it. It's got a doorway, and it's got I don't know if anyone had been down there, but it's got 2 buildings in it. And he's got a racetrack in there, model racetrack, and he's got cars, and he's got all kinds of little goodies all over the place. But anyway, he built 10 V8s, and he's got 5 of them running now. And and he found out that it was more than just a little project to assemble these things and get them running properly. But I had made him some of these cases, and he wanted them. He wanted enough for all 10 engines, so he had these built by a professional cabinet maker, and these are red oak, and if you look at them, they're finished inside just as well as they are on the outside, and he's got these solid brass handles on there because I bought handles just like this from Lee Valley in Canada. And at the time, I think these handles, well, this has been over 10 years ago, were about $40 a piece. So, and this was made about probably roughly 10 years ago. And I just talked to him the other day, and I think he said he forgot how much he paid for them originally, but I think some cabinet maker did them for about $500 or $600 a piece. So he sent me 4 of them, and so I gave this one to Paul, and I've got 3 more. And if anybody in here, they may be good for other engines, but it's rather a large platform. So a little wall forward looks out of place on it. But if anybody's interested in I've got
birdhouse would go good.
yeah, that would go good. But if anybody else wants one, I didn't pay for them. It didn't cost me anything, but it's going to cost you something if you want one. And what I plan on doing is, if you want one for $200, you can get one, and then you put it in a club kitty. I don't want the money. So that's the offer. And these handles are solid brass, and I don't know how much they are at Lee Valley, but when I bought them, they were about $40 a pair, no, or each rather. They sell them each, and so they're probably about $100 for.
Do you know anything about what the finish is?
I don't know.
Bertel and I had some cases made by a local carpenter and another guy that finished the stuff. And we specifically told them.
So if you're afraid of the finish, don't buy them, don't take them, don't do it. But it's an offer, and that's it.
So this guy finished them. Dick put his engine on it and found out that the finish was not gasoline proof.
Oh, bummer. Yeah.
Got to take it off and Varathane finish the top. That'll solve it.
So you could always sand these off.
It's probably fine. They pretty much followed whatever Dwight said.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dwight said use this.
And he's got engines mounted on a couple of these things, and I haven't heard any problem about that either.
Yeah, those weren't free. Dwight was basically his remote reference source for hours of talks.
Right.
By the way, Dwight's cabinetry's nicer.
Yeah, it is.
Just a whole bunch nicer. I haven't got him to sign it yet, but he will.
It isn't branded on the inside?
It's branded, but it's not signed Dwight Giles.
Oh. Yeah, Jerry.
Well, he's giving money away.
Giving samples.
You didn't pay me already this year?
Nope.
Yes.
That's for next year.
I don't know why I quit. A little. No more exhaust valve.
Mike told me that switch that he's got on his, the little lighted switch, he got that from you. Do you remember what the source was of that switch, the power switch on that engine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about?
It's the one with the light.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure you
Oh,
gave that
I
to
bought
me.
that at the auto parts place, and you can buy those switches.
That's off of the saw now. And it's getting very close. Oh, this box, I believe his name is Jim Kipp. He's the man in LA that has more money than his wife. And
Thank you.